Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be. You're listening to Ancient Faith Radio, timeless Christianity 24 hours a day.
This is Everyday Orthodox with your host, Elisa Bielatich Davis. We get together on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. We're hoping to get to know the members of the body of Christ across all of our various jurisdictions and regions. We may worship in various languages or even on different calendars, but we have so much in common. Come get to know someone new and see how they're living out this Orthodox faith in another corner of the world. After all, every person is an icon of Christ, and as we'll see, every person has a story to tell. If you have a question for tonight's guest, we invite you to call in and join the conversation at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-AF-RADIO. Now, here's Elisa.
It is Sunday, September 24th, 2023, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. I'm Elisa Bielatich Davis, and this is Everyday Orthodox, and I'm glad you're joining us. You know, we get together here on Sunday nights to get to know everyday Orthodox Christians. You know, in North America, Orthodoxy is very divided up, right? We're separated into different jurisdictions. We're worshiping on different calendars and different languages. And so very often we can have, Orthodox neighbors right down the street and not know it. You go to someone else's festival and you realize that, one of the moms in your class turns out to be Orthodox, and you had no idea because she's going to a different sort of Orthodox church, right? So I think it's a beautiful thing for all of us to get to know each other, especially across those boundaries. And, maybe in the end, that's the kind of unity that really matters. Not so much about administration, but really about knowing one another and thinking of each other as our brothers and sisters in Christ. So that's what we're doing. So I'm glad that you've joined us. And, Orthodox people are just interesting people. They're just fantastic and fascinating. And I really enjoy, going to coffee hour and sitting down next to someone I haven't met yet, or even someone I do know, but I don't know a lot about them. And if you start asking questions and just listening, you find out that people have been in the most amazing places, done the most amazing things, and they just look like ordinary, little Orthodox worshipers in the pews. So, we have a lot of people, of course, who've come from faraway lands or who were raised by big, wacky immigrant families. But we also have a lot of converts, and people come to Orthodoxy through all sorts of paths. So I think it's always very, very interesting. And you're welcome to call in. You can join the conversation. The number is 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can call them. And Trudy Richter's right here producing the show. So she'll take your calls and she'll patch you right through so you can talk to our guest. And I do want to let you know, we are getting very close. We are 2 weeks away from our 200th episode. Tonight is episode 198. And so when we hit 200, we did decide, 100 episodes ago, that when we hit 200, I'll be the guest. So my daughter Helena is going to come and she's going to interview me and she's going to ask all the questions and I'm going to give all the answers. And hopefully it won't be too much of a mess. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. If it's terrible, we just won't archive it or something. But no, I'm sure it'll be great. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be on October 8th. So think about it. If you have any questions for me, get them ready. You can call in and ask them. All right. So tonight's guest, I think you're going to enjoy very much. Tonight's guest is Lynnette Horner. Now, she works at Ancient Faith. And she is the brains behind, the one who had the creative inspiration to get put together this really neat Nativity devotional that's coming out, or it's actually just out. It's called Behold a Great Light, and it's beautiful. There are several of us. I've written some entries. All sorts of different Ancient Faith writers and podcasters have written certain different entries. And so it's a daily devotional that carries you from the beginning of the Nativity fast, Advent, all the way through Nativity, and then all the way around through to Theophany. And so it's really neat. It's really, really neat. We don't have anything like it. So this was all Lynnette's idea. So we'll ask her about that. But Lynnette's no stranger to being on Ancient Faith Radio because she's a podcaster. She has a podcast called Walking an Ancient Path, Living and Learning Orthodox Christianity. And it actually started as a blog back in 2018. It became a podcast in 2020. And it's been, sort of inviting people along on her journey as she asks all sorts of questions about Orthodox Christianity and struggles through prayer and worship and sacraments and everyday ascetic practices and cultural adjustments on the journey to Orthodoxy. So she figures that if she has a question, probably somebody else has that question too. So if that sounds like you, this is a good podcast for you. But so we're going to get to know Lynnette tonight more personally and find out about her life and her story. So without any further ado, Lynnette, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. I'm excited to have you. And I feel like you and I met before you were working for Ancient Faith. I think that we met quite a while ago. And then
I think it was at the very first Writers and Podcasters Conference, I think.
Yes, that's like
when was that?
2016 or 17. Yeah. So before you started the blog and podcast and you're just kind of starting up, that's cool. Me too. I was just starting as well. But so that's exciting. That's fun. Okay. So, Lynnette, we always ask, to start the show, to start the story, where does your story begin? Where were you born? Where does your story start?
I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, but we moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, when I was 5. The only memory I have of Charleston is there's a palmetto tree at the end of our street. For some reason, that stuck in my mind. That's all I remember.
I mean, it's very appropriate because I've been to Charleston and it's all about the palmetto trees. So there you go. But it's a neat city. It's kind of a shame you didn't get to be there a little bit longer. But Tulsa's a good place too. I like Tulsa a lot.
Yeah.
But so did you end up living your whole youth in Tulsa, or did you guys move again? Okay. So all your formative years.
Tulsa.
Oh wow.
Sure.
Okay. All right. And so as you're growing up, I take it you did not grow up Orthodox, right? Like from the podcast, it feels like maybe you found Orthodoxy later. What was your faith when you were a kid?
Well, when I was little, our family went to church not super regularly. It was a Presbyterian church. It's like every few weeks. And then when I was going into 5th or 6th grade, my parents discovered a First Methodist Church in downtown Tulsa, and we started going and just clicked there and began going weekly. And problem was, it was right when I was going into 7th grade, which back then it was elementary school was kindergarten through 6th, and then 7th through 9th was junior high. They didn't call it middle school then, which is a very bad time to start getting to know people who've gone to the same church since they were, in the cradle. So it was a bit of an adjustment, but it was a really wonderful church, and I really began to grow in my faith and really start to ask questions at a young age. Good questions.
That's neat. That's very neat. I'm curious, and maybe you were too young to see it. I'm curious about whether you saw a huge difference between the Presbyterian Church and the Methodist Church, because sort of like if you look up like the theology of each church, they're different, right? But it feels like in practice, they might not actually have been shockingly different. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, not that I noticed, and also I was too young to understand. Whatever I experienced was Christianity as far as I knew.
Right, exactly.
But when we started going to First Methodist, the teaching was excellent, and it was a really solid church. In the decades since then, the Methodist Church has kind of gone off the rails. Well, like most denominations, they splinter and they fragment and they change their teachings. But I was very blessed with a really active youth group and lots of solid stuff. I mean, there were messes because humans are involved, but it was a good experience for me.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. And on the one hand, hard to adjust, but on the other hand, just in time that you found yourself in like a real community and a supportive Christian place for those really critical years. That's neat. So were you in the public schools there in Tulsa as well? And
yes,
how was that?
always.
Did you like school? What was it like?
I did well in school, so I liked that. It was a place, because I did well academically, it was kind of a place where I got validated, but I didn't, I never quite felt like I fit in anywhere. I suppose most teenagers feel that way deep down, but I remember, was it when I was in 8th grade, some friends, the youth group had a Wednesday night Bible study, and I was like, why would you go to church on a Wednesday night? I mean, why would you go anytime but Sunday? And some friends kept inviting me, and so then 8th or 9th grade, I started going regularly, and at that point, we were encouraged to read our Bibles daily, and I started doing that. And so I've been, with some off times, I've been doing daily Bible reading since I was 15, and I'm really grateful for that foundation, because I think high school is really hard now. I mean, what our kids have gone through and are going through is really tough, but it wasn't great then. There was a lot of drinking, drugs, all that kind of stuff, and I did not feel like I really fit in there, but I did have a few good friends I hung out with, so yeah, I made it through socially, but it wasn't great.
That's kind of amazing, though, to think that you were at youth group as a kid and somebody says, you should read the Bible every day. And you were just like, yes. And you've adopted a lifelong practice from a youth group meeting. Like, as someone, like, I run youth group meetings, right? And I'm thinking about that. And I'm just like, wow, I should think about what I'm suggesting to them and see if I, should make sure that we're suggesting all of these things and not just sort of assuming that at some point it will happen, but to just say it. And then all of a sudden, what do you think? Why do you think you listened? Out of curiosity, like if you were running a youth group, how would you say it to the kids that would work like it worked on you?
That's a really good question. I guess the youth leaders and the volunteers were, our messages that we got, the talks and stuff were very Bible-centered, and it was presented in a really positive way, not like, eat your spinach, you should read this, it's really boring, but you should do it. It was never presented like that. It was presented as life-giving and getting to know God and getting to know Christ by what he had to say. And of course, there's knowing about God versus knowing him, but it's hard to know him if you don't know anything about him. So that positive presentation. I've wondered about that since I didn't grow up Orthodox. It was kind of like pick whatever you want, whereas in the church there are daily lectionary readings. There's some direction that you can go beyond that, but at least you don't have to figure out, well, where do I start? I've heard of people who this is so funny, they became Christians and they were told to read their Bibles and they thought it's a book. So they started in Genesis and went all the way through. And I'm like, how did you make it through Leviticus? How in the world? Most of them gave up by then. But
I'll tell you what, I thought I had to do that when I was younger. And so I would start at Genesis and I'd get to about Numbers and I'd be like, I hate this. And then I'd stop reading it. And then like the next year I'd be like, no, I'm going to do it. And I'd start at Genesis again. And, and Genesis is pretty good, right? And right. You get to the end of Genesis and Exodus is good, sort of. And it kind of you get bogged down and then you just drop it. So I read the first 2 books of the Bible many times as a young person, actually. And then I did realize at some point, or maybe someone told me, but I was like, I'm going to read the Gospels and also the Old Testament. And I never got through the Old Testament. It never occurred to me I could just skip the boring books.
Right.
Well, and also, I think the Orthodox have a very healthy understanding that some books are more important than other books, and that the different books have different purposes. And so, you definitely want to read the Gospels and Genesis and Exodus are great, but really Leviticus and Numbers, you don't need them that much. It's okay to skip ahead, but I don't know. I don't feel like anyone ever told me that when I was a kid. It was just like every word in this book is critical to you having a good life. And every question you've ever had, all your questions are answered in this book, which is sounds.
I still remember one woman I talked to years ago, and I don't even remember who she was, but she had done that. She started at page 1, and she clearly didn't have any real teaching or anyone really speaking into her life. I guess she went to church and she did like you, kept going. It's like, this is not what I've heard about Jesus. And she actually plugged away. And then she'd get to a prophet. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And then the Psalms are wonderful. And then would slog. And finally, she got to the sort of the middle, actually past the middle, the Gospel of Matthew. It's like, there it is. She actually made it through.
Right. I totally relate to that. I was unchurched, so there was nobody to tell me no, the good stuff starts more than halfway through.
Yeah.
That's I don't know. That is crazy. But so I love that though, that you had such a good youth group and that you were reading and that you mentioned that you didn't feel so much like you fit in at school, but somehow reading the Bible and the youth group was filling in for that. Is that right? That it sort of you found your place there.
Right. And I did find friends at school, but I just the whole social scene in high school is like, no. So,
Yeah.
oh well.
Yeah, and I think, it's bad now, but in a different way. It was bad then too. It was rough in some ways that it maybe even isn't this nowadays, but it's anyway. But yeah, so okay. So what did you think you were going to do? Like when you were in high school and you're picturing your life, what did you think it was going to look like?
Well, I thought by the time I was about to graduate from high school, I was thinking about being a doctor of physician because I liked science, but I had advanced chemistry, but looking back, it wasn't really very advanced. And I hadn't gone as far as I should in math. And so I had a scholarship to go to Baylor, which is a Baptist university in Waco, Texas. And I started taking the pre-med courses and realized that is not what I am cut out for. So I don't know, I look back and wonder if I had some tutoring or some help, but I always enjoyed writing and I was always just interested in spiritual things. So I wound up doing a double major in journalism and religion. And really journalism was the wrong choice. I mean, everything is useful, but I wish I'd majored in English, but it was, my parents were like, oh, you need something you can get a job with. Well, you can't get a job easily in journalism, actually.
Right.
But
yeah,
yeah,
and I feel like you could get a job, the same job with an English degree or a journalism degree, probably, right? Like I feel like they're
similar, I think.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think I would have
Baylor's
liked
a neat
literature.
School, Baylor's a good school for medicine, though, so it made sense to pick it and to head that way. So then, as you're taking the religion classes, did you become Baptist? Like, were they really Baptist-y classes, or were they just sort of more?
They were definitely from a Baptist point of view, and so I started, the churches I went to during college were Baptist churches. They had different flavors, different styles, but I look back and one of the things I remember is, so I have an undergraduate degree in religion, which doesn't, I learned very early that having a degree in religion or a seminary degree has nothing to do with godliness or nothing to do with knowing Christ. It means you have your brain stuffed full of fluff. So anyway, I've had more classes than most people, and yet I had no idea what Orthodox Christianity was. I thought it was an Eastern European form of Catholicism, and they just didn't teach anything about it. I think that's changed now in the more recent decades because there's a lot more interest and more materials available in English. But I think it's really interesting that I did an entire undergraduate degree, and then I did. Yeah, after that, Rob and I got married and we moved to California, and I did 1 year at Fuller Seminary and realized wouldn't be able to work it into my life. But once again, also a year of seminary, knew nothing about Eastern Orthodoxy, nothing.
But that's not unusual, right? Like I have actually one of my high school students today just said, she was like, Miss Lisa, I have a question. I'm like, what's that? And she's like, well, in my class, we're talking about Christianity and the history of Christianity, and nobody has mentioned Orthodoxy. And she's like, weren't we there at the beginning? Like, I feel like that was us. Like, it was, honey, but they just don't know. Or if they teach it, they'll say that it died out in 1500 or, but I think that idea that there are Eastern forms of Catholicism, I think that's what most of us think, right? That like you see this kind of like, if people will say they've never heard of Orthodoxy and you're like, well, think about what a Russian priest would look like. And they're like, oh, like it's smoky and dark and he's wearing black. Right. Yeah, that guy, that's us. But so you're going through all of this. You're not hearing anything about Orthodoxy, but you decided to go to seminary. So were you thinking you were going to be a pastor? Like what was the plan? Although the Baptist church doesn't have female pastors, does it?
Depends which Baptist church, because they have,
okay.
Yeah, it's pretty free for all.
Well, I think there are like 15
time,
different kinds of Baptists or something, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, at the time I was thinking about getting my MDiv and then going on, and I wanted to teach religion at the college level because even though I was a young person, I've always loved young people and talking to young people because they ask good questions and they're really open. And I wanted to do that, but I realized also at the time this was long before the internet, so there weren't as many online options and things. And I thought the cost, and my husband and I talked through it, and we were hoping once we had children that I'd be able to stay home to raise them, and I'm grateful I was able to do that. I know it's a lot tougher now for the young families I know to be able to do that. But it was like, okay, so we'll go into debt for this degree, and how's that going to work out? So, yeah, so I just kind of went a different direction instead.
Yeah. Well, so we've just zipped right past this husband of yours. Like, where did you meet him? Do you have a story about when you met?
Yes, we met in that Methodist youth group. I was 9th grade and he was 10th grade. His name's Rob. And we were in a sketch comedy group together that we would do, skits at our youth meetings. And I had a big crush on him. And we dated for a big month and a half, and he dumped me and broke my heart. And so that was the end of that. But we had the same friend group. And so he's a year older than me. He went off to Oklahoma State, and then I went to Baylor, and then he started writing me. And so we just kept in touch, and then we started dating. And so we would, see each other summers and breaks, and take turns driving to each other's campuses. Is like a 6-hour drive. And so kind of went from there. But yeah, so we started out as friends, but we've known each other most of our lives.
Oh, that's neat. That's really neat. But so what is I want to go back to the sketch comedy group, because that sounds hilarious. Like, it was like you were doing comedy was it always religious comedy, or was it just anything silly?
Usually, yeah, it was something to illustrate the Bible study. And I am not remembering now, it's been so long. There were different Christian sketch comedy groups back then in the 70s that would, they made albums, and they would print like comedy booklets or something of different skits. I'm blanking out on the name, but we would do stuff like that, or sometimes write our own. And so,
if only we had YouTube when we were younger, right? Because I never got to see any of that stuff.
I'm actually glad we didn't. I don't want any record of any of that, of my theatrical.
We'd be pulling endeavors. Up videos. Remember this, Lynnette?
Right. No.
Here's you and Rob performing a hilarious skit.
Right. I can't believe. Oh, my hair was so big.
No, that's fantastic, though. Okay, so you and Rob, you got married. Did you go straight to California then, right when you got married, or did you guys live in Oklahoma for a little while, or what'd you do?
We, like I said, he graduated a year ahead of me, and his degree was in electrical engineering, and then he started working on his master's in EE. And he went like summer, so he finished straight through. So we got married like a month and a half before he was done. So we lived in Stillwater for a month and a half, and then he had gotten a job at what was then Hughes Aircraft in Fullerton, California. That was bought by Raytheon. So yeah, we moved to Southern California, and we lived in the unfashionable part of LA. The LA you see on TV is that's a very small amount of people live there, and then there's the rest of us. So we're in the east side, in Whittier, which is where President Nixon is from. Whatever that's
right.
worth.
That's right.
Yeah.
Whittier's actually a really nice little town, though.
It is.
It's actually a very pretty, sweet little town. I always had kind of like, oh, Whittier. And then I just visited someone there, and I was like, oh, well, this is actually very pretty.
It's really nice.
I don't know why nobody's nice about Whittier.
Because it's on the east side. That's why it's not near the coast.
That's so far from the ocean. Whole hour's drive from the ocean.
Wow. Yeah.
That's terrible. I'm in Austin, Texas. We're like a 22-hour drive from the ocean, so I feel like Whittier's pretty nice.
Right. Exactly.
But so were you able then to have kids and to stay home with them and to fulfill those plans that you guys had made?
Yeah, we were in LA for about 5 years, and we went to a Baptist church there in East LA that was very active and very formative for us. And we had our firstborn, Lindsay, and we looked around. We had been trying to save money. You know how hard it is when you're throwing away your money with rent. You're trying to save money for a home. Mm-hmm. And we went one day, had her in the stroller, went to an open house. We started looking at houses we could afford, and they were LA. So they had bars on the windows, cracked driveways, sketchy neighborhoods. It's like, no. So we started figuring out if we could escape to someplace more affordable. And so he got a transfer to, Hughes had a branch in Denver. And so we transferred here in 1991, I think, back when Denver was affordable. So we got a little house, and it was great. And if we moved here now as a young couple, we would not be able to afford that house. So
yeah,
I really feel for the young people. It's not right what else is going on.
It's amazing, isn't it? And it's just, and I guess there are still cities, like I hear Kansas City's next, if you want to. I hear that's the next city that's going to become ridiculously unaffordable. So just brace yourself there,
yeah.
Kansas City. And it sounds like a blessing, right? Because at first it's like, oh, everybody's property taxes are going, or property is going up. That's the other thing, that your taxes go up. But also then it means that your kids can't like settle in the same place where you are, and your grandkids and everybody ends up having to move around, and it does. It's weird what's happening to our culture, I think, and part of it is because of our real estate situation. It's weird, but okay. So you're in Denver. You had Lindsay. Did you have more kids? Did you decide one was good? What'd you do?
No, we had 4. They're all spaced about 2 years apart. We have Lindsay, Ian, Josh, and Caitlin, and Lindsay and her husband live in California, but the others are pretty near here around us. So,
oh, yeah. Very good. Very good. You kind of lucked out there. That's pretty good. 75% retention rate. Not bad at all.
Right.
But so at that point, you're still going to Baptist churches. When did you even like find out about Orthodoxy? How did you hear about it?
It was a really neat, totally what we call a God thing, because we had gone to one church. We wound up at a non-denominational church for 17 years that we were very, very involved in, and the kids, of course, went with us. And my husband was an elder in the church, and I was active in a bunch of different ministries. But I think the turning point was at the same time, our younger 2, we put them in a Christian school that no longer exists. A lot of them fold. It's just hard financially to get a school to go. And it was a non-denominational school. It wasn't really overseen by any one church. And so there were families from like 43 different churches. And when you have that, it's like everyone has their different theological opinion. Everyone has their different convictions. And so just various things happened. I just started to get really burned out on the whole evangelical scene. I was just tired of everyone having a different flavor, and I have this Bible verse to prove my point. You have that one, and it just becomes like endless debate. And there were various reasons we decided to leave our long-term church to go. It wasn't bad. We loved the people there. There were just some reasons. So then we started the horrible church shopping phase, which is you can only go once a week. And so you have to be at a church for a few seasons before you really get a sense of what it's like. And so we tried a charismatic church, which fell apart a few years after that. We tried another church that was evangelical Presbyterian, which is doing wonderful work with the poor in the area. It was surrounded by a lot of apartment buildings with immigrants, and so they'd have soccer clinics and stuff. They were doing just beautiful people doing great things. But it was so casual. It was, you had your coffee and donuts before the service, and you'd bring them to your chair and sit there, and then if you weren't done with your donut, and it's time for communion, you set your donut down and like, dude, pass the juice. I mean, no one actually said that, but that was just the way it felt. And I knew that was wrong. I mean, we had been going to churches that taught it's just crackers and grape juice. There's no salvific power in it. It's not, it's just a symbol. And actually, going back to our Baptist days in LA, because when I was at seminary, we learned different ways of looking at communion. Of course, not the Orthodox way. It was all about the Protestant Reformation. And Martin Luther said that the presence of Christ is, what is it? Like in, around, and under the elements or something. So he called it consubstantiation as opposed to transubstantiation. And then there are other different views. And so I was really into this because, I had grown up in the smorgasbord. So it's like, ooh, these are interesting views. And I remember a specific Wednesday night talking to our pastor at this Baptist church. He had taught a class, and afterwards I went up to him and said, well, what do you think? And he said, it's just a memorial supper. I remember where I was standing in front of the chalkboard there, and something inside me died. I knew that was wrong, but I couldn't articulate why, because it's really, if you can prove from your Bible verse that it's this way or that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was interesting when I look back in my heart, I thought, this is wrong. So anyway, flash forward to this school with all these people.
Right? Like that God-given conscience just sort of saying to you, like, that's not what it's supposed to be.
And the thing is, I'd read the Bible. I had read John chapter 6. And now I look at it, it's like, how can you read Jesus saying, this is my flesh, it's my blood, and then these people leave him afterwards because he's talking about a symbol. But we read and listen through a filter.
Because I'm just like, if it were a symbol, he would have said to them, "Don't worry, it's just a metaphor," and they would have all stayed. But he doesn't. Yeah. He's like, "Fine, go if you can't handle it." And it's like, I don't know. It's weird because once you're Orthodox, you read the Bible a certain way, and then you can't understand how anybody ever saw it a different way, and it's confusing. But
because we have these filters, and so I would read those words, and that they didn't impact me like they should. So flash forward, we're on the church search, and we're
well, don't tell me yet. Wait, don't tell me, because we have to take a short break, and I feel like this is the exact perfect moment because something's going to happen on the church.
What happened next? Stay tuned.
Something is about to happen, you guys. So we're going to take a short break. We will be right back with Lynnette Horner. Please keep in mind you're welcome to call in if you'd like. It's 1-855 AF Radio, 1-855-237-2346. We'll be right back.
Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich Davis will be back in a moment. Give Elisa and her guest a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
This is Father Stephen Freeman. I'm happy to announce Ancient Faith's publication of my latest book, Face to Face, Knowing God Beyond Our Shame. Some modern therapists have described shame as the master emotion, one that colors and shapes our world in ways that we hardly imagine. The Christian tradition is no stranger to this and has a rich understanding of the ways this part of our inner life shapes our experience of the world. This book offers something of a roadmap to that inner life. What is shame? Is it always bad? Does it have any useful purpose for us? Join me in an exploration of knowing God beyond our shame, finding the true God whom the Scriptures tell us did not turn his face from the spitting and the shame. Face to Face is now available at store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich Davis. Do you have a question for Elisa and today's guest? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Elisa.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight talking to Lynnette Horner. And you're welcome to call in if you like, 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And so, Lynnette, we're talking about the church shopping period. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. And I'm thinking about it. And, here you are with 4 kids. And they're right in those, like, middle schooly teen years, right?
Yeah.
Like, that must be painful, like, not having a solid church home you can give them. And I mean, were you anxious about it? Were you feeling like, these kids, I'm going to miss these critical years and they're going to end up without a faith. And by the time I find the right church, they'll be all grown up. Was it stressful?
Yeah, exactly. Just finding a place where we'd fit and where there would be young people there. And it was just really hard. When our older son liked that particular church we were at because of the donuts and stuff, there was like a sofa along the side and he could just kind of veg out on the sofa. It's like all the wrong reasons to like a church, but that's where he was.
So in that sense, it makes it even a little bit more urgent that things are a little casual.
Yes.
It's like, all right, he's here, but he's not here. He's totally checked out. Gosh. Okay. So what came next? It sounds like there was something interesting around the corner.
Yeah. I remember during one of the worship times at this church, they had a praise band and the usual kind of pop music, non-denominational thing. And I remember thinking I just felt just dissatisfied with Christianity, and I knew Jesus was not the problem. I'm glad I realized that. But I thought, okay, my only options are to become Catholic, which for various reasons, I knew I couldn't become Catholic. I won't get into that, just various theological reasons. Or maybe I finally decided maybe just this side of Eden, we're not yet in heaven, everything's dissatisfying. So it's just the way it is. But I was 45 at the time, and I come from a very long-lived line of people. So I was looking at the next 40 years, just feeling dissatisfied. And I thought, oh, Lord, what am I going to do? You know. So during this time, this is the God thing. This was in 2009. Rob dragged me onto Facebook, which he has since disavowed, and I'm barely on Facebook, and not, yeah, for all the obvious reasons. And when you know how people, old high school friends and stuff, you're connected with them and everything. And so during this time, I will shout out his first name, Deacon Brent, who is in Kansas City. He had been part of our Methodist youth group. He's 2 years younger than me. And he posted on his Facebook page a picture of him being ordained as an Orthodox deacon. There were gold robes and a censer and all this wild stuff. I was like, what the heck? And so I messaged him and said, Brent, what happened? And he's a physician, and he and his wife, Cindy, whom we knew from our college group at the church. That's where they had met. They had 3, I think their kids were teenagers then. And he took the time to write me a long response. He said, you know, Lynnette, a lot of my Protestant friends get uncomfortable when I talk, but I've always known you to be a person of truth. So he started talking about being dissatisfied, and they'd go to one church where the louder you yell at God, the more likely he is to listen to you. I don't mean yell at, but, you know, like, Lord, please, you know, do whatever. And others where the theology was just off, and it was like reading my own story, just different details. And so he told us about the Orthodox Church, and he mentioned this wonderful book that Ancient Faith published a little over 20 years ago with the best title I've ever heard. It's called Thirsting for God in a Land of Shallow Wells. And I thought, well, doesn't that say it all? And Rob and I looked at each other, it's like, oh, we have to get this book. And so it's written by Matthew Gallatin, and the first part, he talks about his own experience. He grew up Seventh-day Adventist, and how certain Bible verses were used to justify this, but others are ignored. And it was, once again, my story, but in a different version. And so then he introduces just basic doctrines of the Orthodox Church, and we're like, oh, we need to check this out. So we went, found a parish finder, and found a church near us. And so that started the journey.
Wow. That's neat. That's really neat. I see Facebook. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it really.
And if I'd gotten on Facebook 2 weeks before, the way their algorithms work, I probably wouldn't have seen that. If 2 weeks later, I probably wouldn't have seen it. That's why I say it's just a God thing. Yes, God can even work through Facebook. I know it's shocking, but he can use anything.
He really can. He has control over all the things. He can do it.
Yes.
That's so neat, though. Well, it's interesting that you weren't turned off by the incense and the everything, but I guess it's really his message, like the message that he sent you was so resonant with your own experience. But what did it make you nervous that Orthodoxy looked like Catholicism in some ways? Like, yeah, like we were just saying, everybody thinks Orthodoxy is just Eastern, like it's some kind of Eastern version of Catholicism, right? And unfortunately, Orthodox people say that. They'll be like, oh, we're like Catholics, except this or that. And it's like, well,
oh, yeah.
You know, we're not really.
Sort of.
Don't do that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad we read that book first and read a few other things, because if I'd just gone in blind, I might have been freaked out. But
yeah.
But I remember we went to a Vespers service. We thought, because we were involved in this other church, we thought, oh, we'll go Saturday night. And it was during Lent, and so some people explained things to us, and so I kind of knew what to expect, but also what struck me then and the following services was this palpable sense of holiness, this sense of honor for God and the saints, those who've gone before us. And honor is not really something that's a thing in American society anymore, maybe in the military, but it's kind of everyone for themselves. And even though I didn't understand everything was going on, that hunger was strong enough in me to like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to keep coming till I do, sort of. No.
That's neat. That's really neat. Now, meanwhile, were you writing about your journey as you were going at that time, or did that only start up later?
Not at that time. It started later.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we, our older two went on into college, and so Rob and I were chrismated in the church in 2011 or 2012. You'd think I'd remember. That's kind of important. And then our younger son and daughter were chrismated, and then she was baptized because she had never been baptized. And we went to churches that did baby dedications instead. And let's see. Yeah, we went along, and I noticed just over time I had all these practical questions that I couldn't really find answers to. I mean, there's all kinds of books and brochures and podcasts and things if you want theology, but I was like, I'm just a gal in the pews, and I want some explanations for what's going on or how I'm supposed to handle things. And so I thought about doing a blog, and I didn't have time. I went back to school to get my MFA at Regis, and my specialization was in fiction. But finally I thought, yeah, I want something that talks about the experiential side of Orthodoxy. So I went to a clergy laity conference. It was in Boston, and Ancient Faith had a little booth there, and John Maddox was there, the founder of Ancient Faith, and I had met him at the conference we both went to, and I said I had this idea for a blog, and he said, I'm listening. And so I told him about it, and he explained, turn in some sample posts. And he said, have you thought about podcasting? I was like, no. He's a radio guy, so of course that's the first thing he thinks of. And I was like, nope. So anyway, got it approved for Walking an Ancient Path. So started that in 2018, and then turned it into a blog format in 2020. And so mine is, of course we deal with theology, but I'm really careful I try not to theologize. I do not have the training, but, quote other people. And I just deal with the practical struggles. Like there's one of my early posts was called 4 Sunday Morning Struggles. And it talked about this thing that with feeding toddlers, it's called palate training, that you train them to like certain foods. And in other countries, they will, like in Vietnam, they feed them fish and bone broth, all these kinds of things. And in France, a little preschooler will be eating duck breast and blue cheese and things like that. Whereas we do applesauce and frankfurters, and then we wonder why our kids don't want anything. Yep. But I compared that to that's if you went to a really casual church, pop music, that's our spiritual palate has been trained for that. And then you go to an Orthodox church, and it feels very formal and rigid and foreign, and it spiritually tastes weird. And we have to just understand that and persevere. So that talks about, struggles like that. They aren't very fancy historical things. It's just like, how do I deal with this?
Right. But I mean, in some ways, and especially, I think it's getting better, but I think historically we have had a lot of people talking about theological things and, the difference between this denomination and Orthodoxy or whatever. But the nuts and bolts of daily life, like that's really where a lot of the struggle for people is, right? For a lot of people, it's like, okay, I've accepted the filioque or not having the filioque.
Right.
I'm good with whatever, the body and blood being real, all these things. But wait a minute, what am I what do I do when I'm standing in the pew and I can't focus? Or how do I bring my attention? Or how do I explain this to my kid? And I think, we need those practical things. I think that's important. That's really neat. Yes. And so at some point you actually started working for Ancient Faith, right? Like, did you come on as an editor? What was your first position?
When my youngest was in high school and I was, looking like what's the next stage of my life, I had always done a lot of editing. And so I just made a cold query to Ancient Faith, said, do you need proofreading? I had worked a little bit freelance for a evangelical Christian publisher, just a little, they do heart song romances. Like romance is like the last thing I would ever.
I know what you're talking about. The heart song romance. Absolutely. Oh yeah. So it's always like the pioneer woman with the guy, and they're romantic with the sunset, and it's lovely.
Yes, and they're very, very clean and everything. So I did some work editing them, and so I had some experience behind my belt. And Catherine Hyde, who was the only editor at the time, agreed to give me a try, which I've never asked her why she gave me a chance, but I started proofreading and doing some copy editing, and then she needed help as an assistant, and then the Ancient Faith has really grown, and so then I kind of moved on then into an editing position, and so I absolutely love it. I love working with Ancient Faith authors on things that really impact people's lives. I'm really grateful for that.
That's neat. And I feel like you've edited one of my books. I think you edited Tending the Garden of Our Hearts, didn't you? You edited
I either
something.
copy edited or proofread it. Yeah,
You did something with
I think I proofread it.
Yeah,
yeah,
I remember we were
wasn't your
emailing
main
back and forth, and yeah.
Yes.
But so then, not so long ago, I guess about this time last year, is that right? You had an idea. Tell us about the idea and where you got the idea and what it was.
Yes, it's started around 2 years ago. I was just thinking, the Nativity season rolled around, and it's November 15th, and we start the fast as we are able with food allergies, medical issues, whatever. And as an Orthodox Christian, you look around, hello, is anybody else fasting? No, we're just these weird outliers. And so everything, the only Christmas stuff is, of course, shopping, and then preparing for Thanksgiving. And then I thought, wouldn't it be neat to have a devotional to help center my thoughts in a season that keeps us away from Christ, even though it's supposed to be about him. And so I started looking, and Protestant devotionals, Catholic devotionals are all December 1st through 25th. They're Advent devotionals. And I thought, wouldn't it be neat if we had something that went from the beginning of the fast all the way through Theophany, like through the whole season. And I only found one book called Let All Creation Rejoice. It's available from the GOA. Father Stavros, I cannot pronounce his last name, it starts with an A, wrote it, which is really nice, but it was the only one. So I started thinking about it. Wouldn't it be neat to have Ancient Faith contributors write just a short meditation each day? So I pitched it to the publishing team, and they said, raise some questions, and then got the green light. And so I spent, starting, I guess, January of last year, putting together like a topic for each day, and then inviting people, including some gal named Elisa Bielovich, who agreed to be a part of it, and I'm so glad. So,
Right.
yeah. So there are 8 authors, and each of them take a week. Pardon?
It was really neat how you did it, because you gave us like Bible verses that were relevant to the day, and then you gave us a hymn, and it was like, we're going to put the Bible verse at the beginning and the hymn at the bottom. So it kind of gives you this challenge of sort of tying the Bible verse and the hymn together in a way of like starting us off with the Bible and then moving us to the hymn somehow. And it was, just as a writing exercise, it was actually really neat. And I think it produced a really beautiful book.
Everyone did such a wonderful job. So it starts each one, like you said, it's the day will have either at the front, either a Bible verse or like it also recognizes the feast days, the fixed feast days that are in the calendar. So like St. Ignatius of Antioch, I am blanking out on what his feast day is, but instead of a Bible verse, it's from one of his letters of what he says about the Star of Bethlehem. And then the hymn at the end is from the church. And what I discovered is, and also talking with our content officer, Father Andrew Damick, he was helping me along with some stuff. The weird thing about the Orthodox Church is we're doing this Nativity fast, but the church hymnography, and just as you're going to liturgy week in, week out, doesn't really say anything about the Incarnation. And then suddenly, the last week, it's just this feast of beautiful hymns about Joseph's doubts, about Mary, about the star, about prophecy. And okay, so if you live near a monastery and can go to a service every day, you can find them. But that's the busiest week. You're busy baking, traveling. It's like so nobody knows this stuff. Well,
yeah, you never hear them. You never. The priests know them, but nobody else gets to hear them. The chanters know them, but that's it.
So we do open those gifts out of order, but at least we get to see what the church has to say. And so I've been really pleased with the way it turned out. For those on YouTube,
beautiful.
Here it is.
Yeah, there you
Behold
go.
a great light.
Great light.
A daily devotional for the Nativity fast through Theophany.
And it's available right now at the Ancient Faith store, store.ancientfaith.com, and anywhere you buy books, pretty much. All the online, you can go to Amazon or whatever. But it's better to go to the Ancient Faith store because, if you go to the publisher's store, they make more money off of it. And Ancient Faith is really fast with shipping now. I used to always debate because I'd be like, oh, can I wait 10 days for this book? I'm a very impatient person. But now they're lightning fast, so it works out really well. It's great. Well, it turned out to be a beautiful book. Give us the list of the writers, because you've got the book right there. You can look. I know
Yes.
Father Stephen Freeman, of course, is there, and Nicole Rokas. Who else is in there?
Right. So in alphabetical order, there Father Basil Ross-Aden, who does the blog called Word of the Day, that's every day on the Ancient Faith platform. Elissa, Father Stephen DeYoung, for most people know him from Lord of Spirits and also several books he's written for Ancient Faith. Father Stephen Freeman, as you mentioned. Father Michael Gillis, who writes the Praying in the Rain blog. Laura Jansen, who wrote Fertile Ground and just writes beautifully. Nicole Rokas, whom you know from Time Eternal, and then Brandy Willis Schreiber, who wrote A Long Walk with Mary, who's also a poet, and you can tell when you read her stuff. It's beautiful.
You can tell, you can feel it. It's just,
yes.
I always laugh. I'm like, Brandy, you're amazing. You make Lubbock sound like the most beautiful place on earth. Like that is serious talent right there. But no, the book is beautiful, and it came out beautifully. Of course, on the new calendar, we're getting started with the fast November 15th. So it's timed very nicely to be ready in the fall so that we can all order it and have it on our shelves by November 15th and ready to go. It's exciting.
And those of you who are on the old calendar, it absolutely works for you. You just do the usual add 13 days and then, start.
Yeah,
there.
exactly. You just start on whatever that is, the 28th. They're lucky, though. They start after Thanksgiving. It's very nice.
Yeah,
but
that makes more sense.
It's very good. But yeah, it works the same, right? Because all of the feasts are offset. So everything works out beautifully. It's perfect.
Right.
It's lovely. Well, it is a very neat book. And I like that you have a tendency to it seems like the stuff that you do is very practical. Like it has an application. And I like that. I like to do things that are practical too. I like to do things that answer a specific need that actual people have in their daily lives. Like I'm not going to answer a big theological question nobody can tackle. That's not going to be me. And I don't think that's what you're doing, but you're doing like the practical, here's something that's really going to benefit you in your everyday life. And it's just, it's fantastic. And I want to let you know also, Lynnette, a fan of yours has made a comment on the YouTube chat. And Heidi says, Lynnette's writing is wonderful. I'm very grateful for them. Thank you to her and to Ancient Faith for their availability. Glory to God. So you have fans.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. It's very sweet.
You do a beautiful job, though. You really do. Your writing is really, really wonderful. So what's coming up for you? Are you going to be writing a book yourself? Are you more interested in editing? Are you thinking about other books you want to organize? What are you doing?
I'm continuing to edit for Ancient Faith. I have a book that'll be coming in soon, and I probably shouldn't say which ones they are, and working on another one that's starting. I do writing on my own besides a blog and podcast. And by the way, those who don't know, the Ancient Faith blog platform is shutting down on October 1st. That's right. And so those who have blogs there are going to be available elsewhere. And I had said the wrong thing last Wednesday. I'm going to have a Facebook business page called Walking in Ancient Path. If you go there now, there's nothing there. I'm still working on it. But mine will be available at walkinginancientpath.com, and then also it will be linked to Facebook, so it'll still be easy to find. So I'll continue doing that, and then I'm trying to write a novel that in the spare time. It's a historical novel set during the Black Death, and so I'm slogging through that as I'm able to. Yeah, really, I know it's so morbid. I just love that time period.
Oh, it's so cool, though. That's so cool. I feel like I've read really good books about the Black Death. I'm excited to hear yours. I love that.
We'll see if it sees the light of day. I've written other things and pitched them that did not make it, so I have a virtual drawer full of unpublished novels. But anyway,
well, there you go.
So that's my hope.
Well, one of these days you'll write the one famous one, and they'll be like, "Do you have any other ones? We got to get them out there quick." And the whole floor is going to go all at once. It's going to be amazing. But that is really neat. That's really, really cool. That's right. I had forgotten that the blogs I should pay attention to that. And I should say, too, I have a blog on there as well.
Because you're
It'll be
Raising
moving to my
Saints and
website. Yeah.
I
I
okay.
just have the one. I have the Raising Saints blog, and that's going to move to my website, which is elisabielitichdavis.com. So you can find it there. I think everybody is moving it just to personal websites and things like that because I think for Ancient Faith, it was just more trouble than it was worth.
Right.
It's a lot. Ancient Faith is doing a lot. At some point, you kind of have to bring it down. I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. But so for Behold a Great Light, like, what are we doing? What can we do to get the word out? Like, how do we... I feel like, it would be great if listeners were sort of telling their reading groups about this and stuff. Because I feel like Behold a Great Light is a good one for a group to read together. It's a good one for, you, and it doesn't have to be a formal group. It could just be you and a friend, but it could be also if you have a women's group or a men's group or a read along kind of a crowd. Is Ancient Faith selling that one in the case like they do sometimes for book club books?
That is a good question. I'm not on the marketing end, but I hope so, because it would be good to, like you said, a group of people, and you could just kind of check in, like, hey, what really struck you this week, or something like that. And I think it'd be good for people to ask for your parish bookstore if they have it in stock. If they don't, to see if they can get it, because there's still time. It was released September 5th, and the fast starts November 15th, so there's some time there. But when people see it, they can have it. And it's just, I'm normally not a big devotional reading kind of person, but I find the Christmas season just so distracting, and it's by design that everything draws us away from Christ, that I'm looking forward to reading this without editing, just enjoying it. And it's what were they say, each meditation is like 600, 700 words. It's not long. It's like about 2-3 pages, something like that. So just something to orient us each day.
Yeah, it'll fit into your crazy November, December life, but it'll orient your November, December life, right? It'll help you keep it on track and keep yourself sort of at peace in the middle of all the frenzy and all the craziness. Yeah, right. I think even if it's not sold as a case, one thing, I don't know if everybody knows, but if you go to the Ancient Faith store, if you call them, if you're with the church bookstore, you can. So if you're not, obviously get the person who is. But the church bookstore account gets a 40% discount. So if you get, if you know that you and 12 of your friends are going to read it, don't just go buy it yourselves. Have the church buy it, and then the church makes money on it. See how that works? It's such a blessing.
Plow it back into the bookstore.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan of church bookstores, so I always like to point that out. That if all of you are going to order it, this is what you could do. And then also the shipping is just one big package, and that's better for the earth. So that's my plug. That's my plug.
She can be green at the same time.
Right. Let's all go through the bookstore. It's so good. Is it available as an audiobook? I had somebody ask me.
Yes.
We had a comment on Facebook. She was like, wouldn't it be cool if all the authors read their own devotions? And I was like, guess what? We did record something like that. But I actually don't know if it's available yet. Is that coming out soon as well?
Yes, it's not quite available yet. It's not released at the same time. I think early October, but sometime within a few weeks and well before the Nativity fast. But each of the authors read their own thing, and I read my little foreword, so I had my little one-page thing to read.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's funny to search Audible and find your own name come up, and it's like, oh, wow. Look at that. Look, my voice is on Audible. That's crazy.
And it is, for people who don't have time to read the audiobook, it's perfect short bits for a commute, just for a daily little devotion.
It really is. It's a very, very good little daily devotion in the car. Absolutely. Well, and in general, it's just beautiful. But Lynnette, thank you so much for coming up with the idea for that and for spending all the time.
Alyssa.
I mean, it sounds like, you just thought of it and everybody else wrote it. Actually, you spent a lot of time compiling, finding all these beautiful hymns, and it really pays off. It's really beautiful. So thank you so much for all of your effort.
Thank you. It's definitely one of those projects where fools rush in where angels fear to tread. It's like, oh, wouldn't this be neat? It's like, if I'd known how much work, yes, I still would have done it. But
but you might have cleared your schedule a little more.
Exactly.
So it's called Behold a Great Light, and it's a devotional that'll carry you all the way through from the Nativity Lent all the way through Theophany, and it's beautiful. It's very, very beautiful. But Lynnette, thank you so much for being with us tonight, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Alyssa. This has been fun.
It was fun. It was really nice. I'm looking forward to next time I see you. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And come back next Sunday night, and we'll meet another Everyday Orthodox Christian. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.